In just under 2 weeks' time, the 7 candidates hoping to become the next president of the International Olympic Committee will present their manifestos to the voting members of the IOC. Earlier today, I caught up with one, France's David Lappartient. Of course, he's just come off the back of the very successful Paris 2024 Olympic Games. He's the president of the International Cycling Union, and he's been involved in some of the key moments and the key developments in the Olympic movement over the last year or so. David Lappartient, thank you very much for joining me. It's an incredible time for you. You're in the middle of this lobbying, I suppose you could call it that, as one of the candidates to be the next president of the IOC. Why is that so important to you when it seems to me that you're quite young and you already have a very full table of things to look after with the National Olympic Committee in France, with the UCI as the president, chair of one of the most important commissions for the IOC in the eSport Commission, as well as a multitude of other responsibilities. So why go for the presidency now?
I would say, first of all, because it will be now for the elections. So yes, for sure, the proposition from the president not to modify the bylaws of the IOC, the Olympic Charter, open I would say the possibility to have several candidates. And I was wondering myself if it was or not the right moment. But sometimes it's a moment like in a bicycle race when the breakaway is leaving. Sometimes you have to go to say whether you want to stay in the bunch or to go in a breakaway. But I think, yes, I'm quite young. I'm quite young in the institution. However, I have a solid experience, as you said, as president of a National Olympic Committee that hosted the Olympic Games. And we also bid and we won, I would say, the Winter Olympic Games 2030. And also I've been elected, president of the UCI 7 years ago. And it will be now 20 years that I became a member of the UCI. So I think I have the capacity and to be the IOC president. That's why I will try to explain and to convince my colleagues. But I also think because it's first of all also a question of leadership. Do we trust the president? Do we believe this candidate have the leadership to be the president of the IOC? In fact, this is the answer that all my colleagues will have to that all my colleagues will have to answer in the next coming weeks.
And what does leadership mean to you? Because having read through your documentation that you've put to all of the members, it looks like it could be, if you had to analyze it or boil it down to 3 words, innovation with guardrails. Okay, so we'll talk about the innovation, we'll talk about the guardrails, but what does leadership look like to you?
For me, leadership is a question of behavior, of capacity to take decisions, to lead the organization by example, but also to have a vision. You need to have the vision. You need to be strong to support the IOC philosophy, what is finally our IOC charter, our values. And you need also, leadership is also the way that the president can lead the organization by bringing everybody behind, I would say, but also can take the expertise, the value from all the colleagues without also having always 20 counselors around him to tell him or her what she or he has to do. It's important to have we have a lot of very qualified people in the IOC, which is great among the staff. But at some points, it's the job of the president to lead the organization, to take the decision. When you are in a meeting with strong leaders in the world, with chief of states, you need to be able to answer the questions without having, always notes, consider behind. We have a solid leader today with Thomas Barr, and we know all of us that when he is leading a meeting, we trust him. He brought a vision with the new norm, with the Agenda 2020, and Paris 2024 was in a way the achievement of this vision. And I think leadership is about vision, it's about the behavior, and it's probably about you have or you don't have the leadership. It's not something you can learn in a book.
So let's talk a little bit about innovation and, change or be changed has been the mantra for some time under Thomas Bach. I should just explain to everybody, if you can hear noise, we're at the international airport. David only has a few minutes between flights. It's also raining, so I hope he's not getting too wet.
We are used to this in Brittany, in the north part of France, so I'm not afraid about the rain.
Good. I'm very glad about that. Okay, so change or be changed. And I know that you're confronting this yourself as the president of the UCI, with the discussion about one cycling. You spoke about the breakaway in cycling. You don't want this to be a breakaway moment, and so there's negotiations. Would you say this is part of the innovation of sport? It's a natural cycle of sport, or would you say that it's also a combination of that and politics? Because politics is always skirting around the edges of something that involves international sport and the big business of the Olympics.
I think we need innovation. You can't always be at the same points because the world is changing. The world is becoming more and more disrupting, with more specifically with digitalization and so on. So we must be open. We must be connected to the young generation. However, we also need not to forget where we are coming from. We have solid roots, we have history, we have values. So we must combine all these values, all this history with innovation. And as an example, Paris 2024 was the perfect example. A lot of innovations, sometimes outside of the box, but finally it brought wonderful Olympic Games. So I think we can keep the spirit, we can keep the values, but also to bring innovation. Because yes, it's change will be change. So I believe we must have more and more innovation. Also because new sports sometimes are coming, because new way to watch sports events are also a reality today for the young generation, and we have we need to have open eyes at the Olympic movement.
So what about, aside from the fans and the spectators and needing to innovate to get new generations, as well as retaining the older generations, what about for the athletes themselves? Because there are some changes now. It's a political time, isn't it? Athletes are encouraged to take a stand on things. And we know that there are differences all around the world. That's a challenge for various sectors. But also discussions about whether athletes should be paid to compete at the Olympic Games. I know you wrote about that in your manifesto. You don't think they should be. Well, how do you gauge where those very pressured points are?
First of all, I would say that the athletes are completely at the center of the Olympic movement because they are the key players of the Olympic Games, and we must respect that. But of course, there are questions about, for example, the one you raised about the prize money. So we have a lot of revenues in the Olympic Games, but where are these revenues going? 90% are for the Olympic families, athletes, national Olympic committees, and international federations. And I think we must keep this proportion. But for the athletes, if the athletes are paid, then it will be only the top 3 athletes, and we will concentrate the revenues on a happy few, I would say. Good for them because they are the top athletes. They are the one also who are able to bring emotions to everybody. However, usually these athletes, they have also the opportunity to gain more revenues with their Olympic medal, with what they are doing. And our goal at the Olympic movement is also to continue our solidarity, to give hope to all athletes all over the world. And during an Olympic cycle, it's around 650 million US dollars that we will spend on solidarity to give the same opportunity to all the athletes. So it's whether you concentrate on a few athletes or whether you continue to distribute in solidarity. And I'm more for the second option. But of course, the debate can, and the presidential election is also a place for the debate. And I respect the point of view of my colleagues who have another point of view on this. But for me, I'm more aligned with, I think, the global philosophy of my colleagues in the Olympic movement, and also on the Athletes Commission, because they clearly said that they are in favor of this solidarity model.
The innovation, one of the things you talk about is continental centres of high performance or centres of excellence. Just talk a little bit about why you think that is important.
I think we have two or three things important. The first one is to keep universality. Of course, all the 206 nations are able to participate to the games. However, we want to be sure that they can just not have the right to participate, that they can be competitive, and that they will have second point, they will have the same opportunities, which is not really the case today. And why I put it this, because we've done this in cycling. We have the World Cycling Center. We are probably one of the only international federation to use the Olympic revenues not for our day-to-day business, but for solidarity and development. We have the World Cycling Center in Switzerland, but we have 10 satellites all over the world. And then we can deliver expertise. We can bring the top athletes in the sub-region, in these regional centers. They can reach another level and then potentially go to the World Cycling Center and then compete to the Olympic Games. We had, for example, in cycling, 11 athletes through this program qualify to the Olympic Games. And that's good, because I think in some countries, you don't have the equipments, you don't have the expertise. And if you concentrate this in some centers, you will give more opportunities to the athletes. Because if you look at the number of athletes, the top 5 countries will concentrate more and more medals in the future. And one of the dangers is to concentrate, I would say, too much in some countries, even if Australia and France are among these top countries. So I don't want to be against my country, but as IOC President, I have also to think about all the universality. And I think it's key. That's one of our mission, is to enlarge the sport everywhere in the world.
Some of the guardrails now, one of the big issues, and we saw it in Paris, was regarding the boxer Imran Khalif. And yet I think a lot of the media coverage got really sidetracked on an issue that it wasn't Imran Khalif that was transgender, but they were wrapping it all up with this transgender discussion. We know that some sports have ruled very heavily on transgender. We know that the UCI was actually involved in a very strong case in Canada many years ago now regarding transgender. Where do you sit on that? Because from my perspective, there's not very many transgender athletes, but it seems to be a very big problem because it's magnified in the media so much.
Yes, for sure. That's not an easy topic, to be honest. And I was probably the only one to address a little bit this topic in my manifesto, which could be seen as quite dangerous. But I think when you're running for a position, you are not only you can't not only address easy topics. You have also to deal with topics that are not easy. And the next Olympic Games will be in US, and you also saw the statement in US regarding transgender. And sure, it will not be an easy topic. However, I think there are 3 points. The first one is we must respect the right of everybody to make a transition if this is their desire. So that's the first statement. Second statement, all the transgender are welcome in the world of sport, and we want to have all the transgender to do sport, to practice sport. But the third point, which is in fact the one of the Olympic Games and the competition, in which way the participation of a transgender will affect the fair competition or not. And this is a question we have to answer. And we have also to recognize that the answer can be different in between some sports. If you are in cycling, in track cycling, it could be a little bit different than, in shooting or sailing, or horse riding. So, yes, we believe that it must be also a decision based on fact, based also on the respect of the people, but also based on fair competition. We have also to hear the voices of the female athletes. Said, okay, we want the institution, the International Federation, the IOC, to guarantee a fair competition. And as long as it doesn't affect the fair competition, we don't have any problem. But if it can affect the fair competition, then we have to take some decision. This is why, for example, in the UCI, we had to take the decision that for international races, transgender are not allowed to compete or as their new transgender position. but they are, of course, welcome. They can participate in mass participation. So that's not an easy topic, and the answer can be a little bit different from one sport to another.
And it's also very political at the moment. We saw
Of
it
course.
play out during the US election as well. So what are the other issues that you see? You said you're not afraid to address the issues as far as you see them. There's also, sort of geopolitical tensions at the moment. A lot of people in the West are nervous about the involvement of Saudi Arabia in sport, but the IOC has signed an agreement with Saudi Arabia for the esports games, which came under your commission. And also, interestingly, it is Saudi Arabia that is talking about one cycling at the moment, and the UCI. So do you think the one gives you an advantage in dealing with the other because you have the connections? How should the Western world be looking at Saudi Arabia's continued growth and expansion into the international world of sport?
There are 2 points. I will come back maybe on the Saudi Arabia situation, but more globally, we are a politically neutral organization, and it has to stay like this. So we want to keep our autonomy, and we want to stay politically neutral. This is a clear statement that I made on my manifesto, and this is why we are all together. If we escape from this, I think we will lose what is a big asset of the IOC, is to have 206 nations able to compete together in a fair way and to respect each other. That said, of course, we can have sometimes a Western vision of the world. Some of there are another vision of the world. We have to respect these visions as long as human rights are also respected. I've been many times in Saudi Arabia. I can see the evolution of the pay under the leadership, and really there is a young generation. It's nice to see the evolution. It's nice to see the passion for the sport in this country. And they are welcome in the sport, whether in cycling, because there are ongoing discussions, but of course on esports, and the crown prince himself is a strong player, and really they know about sports, and they want to be more involved about sports. So they are welcome in the sport, and I also consider that the sport is also a way to, and then I don't speak about Saudi Arabia, but more globally. It's also a way to open the countries. So I don't like the statements that, okay, we will not go in this country or this country or this country because they don't share our Western values. But I think the Olympic values are to be shared by all of them. And if by bringing the sport, we can help to bring these Olympic values, let's go.
So where do you see the Olympics' place in the world, in the global world of today, which is changing very fast with all of these geopolitical shifts, with the advent of AI and how that's going to challenge everything, social media, new generations versus the old generations? What do you think is the crucial element of the Olympic Committee and Olympism, and how important it is in the bigger discussion?
I would say, first of all, that President Barr brought the IOC at the highest level. I think we are fully and well respected by nations. But of course, it was challenging time, the last period, but I'm sure we will have also challenging times in the future. And so the IOC is a kind of bridge also in between. You have the United Nations from one side, but you have also the Olympic movement in the other side, and the relationship are very good. And I think we must discuss with everybody, and the IOC has clearly a key role to play. To support peace in the world, and sport is a tool for us to also support peace, to bring peace. Is also a way to hope to hope in the future, because I believe that when you are competing together, then you share the respect, and then it's a good way to respect each other, even if you are not in good relationship with your neighbor. So clearly, the Olympic values, what we are doing, is really something to share, and I think that the Olympic values are not some. It's not an old-fashioned way to see the IOC. It's probably the most modern way, and it's nice to see that 130 years after, they are still so strong, and even probably never been stronger than now. And this is something we need to share, and this is why the voice of the IOC, I think, has to be stronger and stronger in the future. But it has been the case over the last decades.
People have been talking. I've referenced this elsewhere. People have been talking about the demise of the Olympic Games for a very long time, but they survived. They're still there, as you say. Do you feel like, personally, you are on a bit of a roll as an IOC member based in France because of the incredible journey that France was on before the 2024 Olympic Games and the delivery of what has been described widely as the best Olympic Games ever? And that's saying a lot coming from Sydney, because we thought we had it.
Exactly, but it's true that the Paris Games, and thank you, were very nice, and I think they brought also a lot of fresh air to the Olympic movement. And also thank you to our Japanese and Chinese friends, because they organized the last two editions under the COVID period, and it was so important for the Olympic movement. So thank you to them. But we came back a little bit to a normal life in Paris with the French touch, sometimes a little bit outside of the box. We can be sometimes we can receive a little bit some criticism, but however, I think it brought wonderful games. But it's true that the games were born in Paris with Pierre de Coubertin, and yes, we deliver wonderful games. We also won, the tender, I would say, for the 2030 Winter Games. So Olympic Games are clearly part of the French DNA. And I think if I can also help to share all these values, that could be nice. And I think I also come from a country that can also discuss with everybody, which is also great. But when you are an IOC president, you are not with the city. You are, of course, you have a passport from a country, but you are first of all the leader of the IOC, and you must ensure that everybody will support, that you will not escape from your political neutrality. But to be politically neutral doesn't mean that you have nothing to say. You have the contrary. I think you have to make clear statement about your values. Where do you want to go? What do we want to do with the Olympic movement? And yes, in a way, the Paris Games were a kind of new birth of the new version of the Olympic Games, and that was great.
It certainly was. I wish you every success, and I thank you very much for making some time in your very hectic schedule.
Thank you, and it was nice to be together and not to be in visio, even if it was probably a little bit noisy here at the airport, and you can see that people were laughing behind, not about our speeches.
You hope.
Yes, because the Australians like this, they like to spend time together.
Yeah. Thank you, David.
Thank you. My pleasure.